Yes, welcome. Thanks for being with us this morning, and a Happy New Year to you.
Thanks for inviting me, Sakina, and Happy New Year. Good to see you.
Likewise. Now, the ANC Secretary General, Ismail, he says that the party wants to give hope to the people of South Africa. What sort of new insights can we expect from the ANC?
Well, they're under pressure, and I think that the ANC at this point in time is one of the few political parties that have got a good electoral hold, if you like, numerically. They just came from the elections last year. They did well. But the legitimacy of the party to make decisions and to connect with the poor is what I think is at issue here. I mean, this is a situation where one has got that electoral hold, but that legitimacy has declined. So as we talk about these celebrations, there isn't much to celebrate. For me, I think they should be reflecting on their relationship with the poor. They should be reflecting on what has happened. What is the main focus of the party? So far, recently, in the past few years, the party has been used as a platform for factions. It has been used as a platform for proliferation of interest groups within the party. It has been a subject of state capture and so forth. All of this is a clear symptom that the gap between the party and the poor has widened, and they need to reflect on this. They should have less of celebration but more of reflection, and reflecting should be about their relationship with the poor. So it's a good message. The question is, are they going to do it, or is it just doing a lip service to this?
Well, ironically, the January 8th celebration is taking place in the Northern Cape, and this is a province, you know, that basically exacerbates or has exacerbated levels of some of the social ills that we see in the rest of the country. We talk about some of the challenges, you know, unemployment, service delivery challenges. It does seem to be somewhat exacerbated in some provinces, and the Northern Cape is one of those. So is there any irony in the ANC going to the Northern Cape at a time like this?
I mean, I was quite inspired by Jesse Duarte's assertion that members of the ANC should stop being arrogant. If you look across the country, and you're talking about the Northern Cape, that's the area where the concentration of the problem of the ANC are actually found. Northern Cape, Eastern Cape, Limpopo, but certainly Northern Cape being one of the neglected provinces. That is exactly, I think, the choice of venue, it's a correct one. And I do think that members need to reflect. Members need not be arrogant. Members of the ANC need to understand that political power should be used for the betterment of the poor. If it's not being used for the betterment of the poor, it will be used for something else that we have seen in the past few years. So they should reflect right there. It is the right place for me, the right theater to talk to the people. And they've done door-to-door before this. The question, Sakina, is that this thing tend to be once-off sometimes, events-based. But after then, what programs are they going to announce that are focused mostly on the poor? We stand to hear that.
When you say arrogance, what exactly are you referring to? Is it the ostentatious display of wealth that some members, you know, are basically prone to? Because we've seen this at previous January 8th statements where the ANC members that attend these events go all out to display, and sometimes rather in a rather vulgar way, which they have amassed.
I have attended those events, Sakina, with the SABC, the media houses, and go to the parking lot. At times you feel that people went to the car dealership just to get cars in time for that. Go there, and I know people will be monitoring those things. And that is exactly what is spoken about here, that it is quite offensive to the poor to come and say this is what the ANC represents. Usually we have this business breakfast that accompany all this, and I've been following this. I've heard that some people even wanted to suggest extended hours for selling alcohol, and I said that that's the time you should actually sober up and look into the reality of what South Africans are actually experiencing. So I have attended those things, and when it's the celebration part of it becomes too much. The reflection is so little. and the offensive way in which some members of the ANC carry themselves. And again, some of them defend themselves by saying that black people should also be allowed to have a prominent life and so forth. And I often say that those who actually lived poverty, those who lived it, should be the one that empathize the most with the poor. I actually expect a lot from them, because majority of the members of the ANC have lived poverty. Majority of the rank and files should come from the people. Those are the people who actually know exactly what not to do. You can't go there with those flashy cars and everything, but we know that it becomes a fashion parade. It's almost like people, it gets sad. I have been there. I'm not talking second hand. I've seen, go to the parking lot, you're going to see it for yourself.
And then, you know, just honing down a little bit further on the plight of the poor. The president was in Pampierstad yesterday, and again, one of those very sad pictures of a town in that particular province, and the message that is brought to the people when there is no service delivery, when there are no jobs, when people are feeling hopeless, you know, do they actually believe what the ANC is saying at this point, or what does the ANC need to do to convince people that they actually do have their best interest at heart?
You know, what I've seen so far, Sakina, you talk about Pampierstad. I'm from Limpopo. I know this. I go around Free State. I go around Eastern Cape. You see people confronted with the collapse of local government. Services are not being provided. And when the poor cannot rely on the state, most of them, they don't have enough to purchase those services. I mean, in some urban areas, the middle class, they can actually start purchasing services as they're doing in the private market. They buy education, they buy the removal of refuse and so forth. But the poor depends on the state, and the ANC need to understand that you really need to strengthen government institutions. You cannot have local government collapsing. But I also think over and above that, Sakina, we need pro-poor policies. We have been managing poverty with state security and social welfare. But you do need some of the policies that are crafted with the sole intention to deal with the poor. I don't see that. Rural economic development, you talk about the Northern Cape, it's not the most urbanized, it's a sparsely populated area. You really need a pro-poor policy that can deal with rural economic development. But that is not the focus. And you know the reason why? Most of pro-poor policies do not allow for patronage. That is where the problem is. They tend to be much focused on mega projects. We are going to build this. And if you look at them, as I've always criticized them, is that stop these interventions that are driven by service providers. Stop these interventions that are meant to benefit interest group. Just focus on the pro-poor. Build relationship with the pro-poor, because after all, they are your core constituencies.
Why is the ANC struggling with that? And do you believe that the people, the electorate, do they have any sort of trust in the ANC at this point?
People are desperate. Where will they look, Sakina? I mean, would they look in the direction of the DA, that in most cases also offend the poor and offend the historical path through which the poor came about? Would they look in the direction of the EFF, which in my mind, the EFF sometimes, it just vandalizes the poor as well, use their plight to push the politics that is not in the interest of the poor at all. So, I mean, in the greater scheme of things, the poor still look in the direction of the ANC. You know, this 108 years, people are saying that perhaps there is something about it. Perhaps people can reflect, and it's desperation, Sakina. Where do you look? Unfortunately, South Africa's political system is such that people just talk the rhetoric of the poor, but you don't really see that real empathy with the poor. So that is why they are looking in the direction of the ANC. That is why the poor will go vote for the ANC today and go protest against the ANC municipality the next day. It's just an unfortunate situation that shows desperation. There are fewer political options for the poor in South Africa, unfortunately.
But the rhetoric kind of remains the same. The president yesterday saying that the ANC is aware of the challenges that the poor face in this country and that they will prioritize these challenges. What does the ANC need to do to prove that it is actually serious about what it is saying?
I think that arrogance, they need to manage that arrogance, but also they need to just desist from politics for its own sake. I mean, we go through the elections, there is just political power. You look, we've got one of the most robust democracies, but if you look at the concentration, where is it being concentration? Elite politics. ANC members need to go back and revitalize local leadership. They need to go back and help communities organize themselves. Communities, in most cases, they are leaderless. That is one of the reasons why the best way for the communities to communicate with the political leaders is through protest. Elites, we have got this politics that seems to be concentrated a lot among the elites, factionalism and so forth. So there need to be renewal in terms of the thinking within the ANC. If the thinking, the outlook does not change, Sakina, they're just going to try to manage this and it's not working.
But to that point, it has become, for all intents and purposes, politics of patronage for the most part. And therefore, if you look at the state of the municipalities, how run down they are, how bankrupt they are in all senses, not just financially, but, you know, basically morally, socioeconomically, these municipalities are bankrupt. How do the leaders of the ANC go back to such situations where we talk about, you know, people having to show, having a turn to feed at the trough and enrich themselves? How does the ANC get back to basics?
You know, Sakina, if I were to compare South African political parties, all the criticism I've leveled against the ANC, when you look at the institution, the structures of the ANC, I believe it is one of the most democratic institutions. They've got the branches that are supposed to connect with the people. Branches should not be
supposed to.
That are supposed to, and they are not, because what we are seeing with the branches is that people capture the branches, people control the branches, and they trade in the political support that they bring through the branches, and it's just a stepping stone. You look at people at local government, you ask someone at local government, the regional leaders of the ANC, you ask themselves, what is your destiny? Are you using this for a stepping stone to national politics, or do you see this as a theater where you can push politics and be able to help people, where it is an end, where you can actually demonstrate astute political leadership at that level? You don't really find that thinking. This local government, why we're talking about local government in this way, is that it's not been taken seriously. People use it as a stepping stone. When the president goes to a region, when the president goes to Northern Cape, the president goes to see some of the regional leaders. ANC regional leaders have become power brokers. That is a shift. Power brokers, it means they are selling power in exchange for patronage. It is not sustainable, because one thing I'm noticing in South Africa is that the broader communities are disengaging. If people don't believe that democratic processes can bring about goods and can bring about accountability, people will find a way to engage with the system. And it's just a matter of time until what we used to call benign dictator emerges, and we are going to have the collapse of democracy. There is a serious risk of the collapse of democracy. If democracy does not deliver, there is no reason for people to keep on supporting this institution. That is where the risk is, and the ANC need to be aware of that.
That's such an interesting point that you raised, because I immediately think of the Eskom example and Eskom's failure to deliver effectively to the people of South Africa. And now we're hearing more and more talk of people getting off the grid. Those who are able to are already off the grid.
Exactly.
Most are aspiring to get off the grid. And we see now the introduction of alternative power supply, and many calling for other entities like municipalities to be able to procure independently from Eskom. And it speaks to the point that you just made about communities disengaging because of a lack of ability, interest, whatever you want to call it, from the political elite.
Sakina, historically, we need a focused state. In the past, we have had the state that did not care for majority of the people. Now we have reconstituted the state in the post-apartheid. That if the ANC fails, the state will fail. That is just where this is going to. And when the state fails, what are you going to get? You are going to have communities desperately trying to organize themselves. Let's be realistic. Most of our people cannot afford to buy these alternative services out there. Even these people off grid, people are talking about going off grid using the solar. You and I, we can try, you know, to get that battery just to switch the laptop on when power is off. But poor people, they cannot afford that. Renewables are expensive as well. We need to know. That is why we need the strong state. So the ANC, I think they will have to take the responsibility here that if they do not get their action right, if they don't get their conduct right, they will be taking responsibility for the collapse of the state. We cannot deal with the situation where the state keeps on receding.
But some would say you are overstating the importance of the African National Congress in that regard.
I wish I was in a position. Sakina, I wish I was in a position. I wish I was in a better position, because the reality in South Africa is that, and that is the reality whether you like it or not. Oppositions are not offering alternative. Opposition, they cannot craft anything outside the ANC. Show me an opposition party that can have a conversation in a day without mentioning the ANC. Therefore, we unfortunately find ourselves in a situation where we rely a lot on the ANC. And if the ANC fails, unfortunately, there is a high risk of people just disengaging and the state actually failing. That is just the reality. I wish our democracy was not configured in that manner. But unfortunately, I cannot lie here and say to people that I see realistic option that can be explored in the next 2 years or so. The reality is that the ANC, and the ANC, they are aware of this. I just hope they humble themselves and take this responsibility and understand that actually maybe this should be beyond their egos, if you like. There is a much bigger responsibility. At this stage?
Is that possible? Is the ANC able to regenerate at this point? Press the reset button and start again?
I'm very hopeful. And I'm very hopeful that the possibility of losing power, because political parties do not just regenerate because it's a nice thing to do. They should be confronted with the reality of losing power. And the reality of losing power is setting in. In the elections, they've performed quite poorly. They are going into local government elections next year. Municipalities, you know, the story, we all know it. So the reality, the imminent loss of power should be the message. If they don't listen to that, I don't know what political party want to be there if it's not in power anyway.
What's the importance of the tripartite alliance at this stage where the ANC seems to find itself in all sorts of turmoil?
You know, the tripartite alliance, Sakina, in most cases, the SACP and COSATU, when the ANC is having its own internal divisions, they have not helped the party to actually reflect. What they do is to just go into align themselves with a faction of the party. I mean, they have not really helped the ANC so well. I was hoping that the tripartite alliance should be a safe space for comrades to reflect genuinely. But I don't see that. When the ANC is weak, the SACP seems to gain legitimacy. And what do? It's all about bargaining for power. The tripartite alliance seems to be a chamber through which bargaining for power is taking place. It's never about the people, in my mind. I mean, they have changed their politics. We need to talk about that separately. I call some of the members of the tripartite alliance very predatory in their attitude. They look at opportunities. The ANC is weak, they want to grab an opportunity there, make sure that some of their members are in government and so forth, put some of their policies which are based on ideology and not really on dealing with what the people actually want. And this alliance needs to be configured in terms of the thought process that actually goes into it.
So in order to rekindle some form of hope in the nation, because this January 8th statement, you know, is essentially precursor to what comes in the State of the Nation address. So what are we going to be on the lookout for, the touch points that the president has to make in this statement?
I hope we don't get another rhetorical speech, because the circumstances now are such that there are urgent issues that need to be attended to. Safety and security, Sakina, is very much important. It has become such a basic that when you walk the street and you get home with your cell phone, it's like, oh my God, another successful day. It shouldn't be to that point. High unemployment among young people. If you do not address unemployment among young people, you are going to radicalize young people. And when you radicalize young people, they are going to disrupt the system. You will no longer even have an opportunity to implement policies. Just be humble. And have a speech that shows that you reflect with the people. Don't tell people you have built how many houses. They know. Just be honest and look forward and humble yourself and say that we want to reground this party to try to deal with the actual challenges. You need to be more practical. There is just no opportunities to indulge at this point in time.
Well, Dr. Ralph Mathekga, thanks so much for your time. Political analyst, talking to us about the ANC's January 8th statement and the party celebrating their 108th anniversary.